to Magdi-AI Tutorials, where we help you make the most of Magdi-AI, your software quality assurance AI assistant. Today, this tutorial is going to cover creating a new project scaffold for test automation using MagdiTestGen. So let's continue. All right, so let's begin by clicking the button MagdiTestGen Build Test Plus Framework. And what we're going to do is we're going to upload a document, clicking the upload button, and we're going to choose a specification where we want to use it to help us create a new test automation project. So let's begin by simply saying create test. In this day and age, what really surprises me is the number of companies that still do not have a solid test automation approach. You would be surprised at the number of companies that exist that still rely either on developers doing their own tests or manual QA engineers. And one of the things that's very challenging when you have manual QA engineers, they don't often have the training to switch over to test automation. So getting that project launched off the ground comes fairly slow. So here it comes back and it says, okay, I got the document. Do you want me to generate manual or automated tests? So let's tell it automated. So oftentimes what they will do is they will hire somebody who has the skill set to kind of come in and begin with developing automation. And depending on the skill level of that person, it can go fairly quickly or it can take a long time because that person is selecting the tech stack that they're going to use, they're learning the product. Okay, so let's pause for a second and see. And says, okay, great, let's set up the automated test. So it's asking you a number of questions in order to begin setting up the test. And so it kind of outlines to you, okay, the scope. Is asking you, do you want to do the API, UI, end to end, or both? So what you can do is say both. You don't have to use the slash. You can use a comma. It's just something I use to kind of delimit the answers to the questions that I'm answering. So then it's asking you, what framework do you want to use? So, if you're using UI, do you want to use the Playwright, Cypress, or other? And if you're using API, what do you want to use? Do you want to use Rest Assured, PyTest? Which framework do you want to use? So here I'm going to say use Selenium and Rest Assured. And then it's asking you about the environment base, the base URLs or any special headers in the US. And so here we're just going to say it's a basic URL. And I'm just going to give it a dummy URL. And then next is going to ask us determinism. Can we seed, mock, or RNG for predictable outcomes, or should we avoid asserting exact symbols and focus on contract balance and rules? So here I'm going to say focus on contract balance and rules. Uh, I should mention that the example specification that we're using is based on online casino games. And you can find this example specification in our GitHub project, and the URL will be in the description below. So next is asking us what type of output would we like, any preference for reporters. Um, and we can say here, use a recommended output approach because maybe you don't know. And it's also asking you if you don't have preferences, You can say default to. So it's giving you a default list here. So you can change from this, or you can kind of say, oh, okay, um, no, I want to kind of modify this based on the settings. Another thing that I can do is say, um, also please take into consideration I'm using Windows 11 and Visual Studio 2022. So what I'm trying to do is also tell it uh, what operating system I'm working on, as well as what development tool I'm working in. Okay. So I'm kind of responding, answering its questions in such a way so it has that information so it can begin creating a new project for me. The reason why I added the operating in the IDE that I'm using is so that it can create the project in a manner that is compatible for that OS as well as for the IDE that I'm using. um, and that becomes it makes it very helpful when you're kind of copying the contents to set up your project. If you were using Eclipse, you could tell it to use Eclipse or NetBeans, whichever tool that you're using, so that it makes it easier to have the project as configured to support your environment as much as possible. So, a lot of times, what this will do is it will help you get started. So, once you've kind of identified the tech stack that you're going to use, you can actually use Magdi AI to kind of help you begin with your framework development. It doesn't mean that you won't evolve it, add your own ideas, but it will help you get started, which is often takes a huge amount of effort. I would say when I worked for a gaming company that developed online casino games, I think it took me maybe 6 weeks to kind of develop the basic framework based on the abstract factory design pattern and to run regularly around 30 something test cases on a regular basis. But that comes from the fact that I'm a seasoned test automation developer. I've been doing it for more than 20 years. And what I have witnessed when you have somebody who has less experience, let's say they're more on a junior level, it can take months for them to even get to that point. And it's very, very understandable because you're trying to create a design that works for the application under test. It can take time to um, figure out the best approach, how to get the framework to recognize different elements of the application. Sometimes recognizing elements is very straightforward. Other times, it it's a challenge. Sometimes you're dealing with dynamic elements. In other words, an element only appears after you've kind of executed a function. Other than that, it doesn't pre-exist in the HTML code. Sometimes we run into timing issues. Sometimes the lineage kind of the elements kind of changes on you. So there's a lot of things that kind of challenge you to kind of get it up and running. Another thing with Magdi AI is, we can also kind of feed in the HTML code so that we have the actual tags that or the element IDs that we need to use as part of the framework. So that's another idea that you can do. You can upload the specification and then you can kind of upload the front end code. So here we go. So if we scroll up, we see there's a lot of output that it generated. And so it's kind of telling you, hey, I have a complete runnable Java automation project for your 3 slot online casino game, and it's using Selenium UI and Rest Assured for the API testing, and it's going to be built on Windows and is easily runnable in Visual Studio Terminal using a Maven wrapper. So that is really, really cool because the Maven, one of the best things that I like about Maven is not just the ability to build and execute your project easily, but also to kind of help you manage the dependencies that you rely on in your project. So here it kind of outlines to you the key choices. So it's kind of telling you the scope, the framework that it's going to use, the tech stack that it's using. This is the URL. It's using a default user ID and what it's going to focus on and the type of reporting you're going to get. So as you kind of scroll down, this is another thing that is really nice is that it tells you this is the project directory structure. So when you're creating the project or you're copying the contents, you understand how to create your folder and your subfolders and what files belong in what subfolders. So that's really cool. And then as you kind of scroll down a little further, it gives you your basic Maven POM file. So you have this. We scroll down a little bit more. It has the basic configuration. This is related to the results. So it's using Allure to produce the results. It's going to give you a README file. So the README kind of lets you know what your requirements are, which kind of helps you with understanding the tech stack that it's using, the defaults. Um, it gives you a way to run all tests. So here is telling you to use PowerShell or command, and this is how you should be able to run the test once you put the project together. Here you have the API tests only, and this command here will run all the tests, and it even tells you, okay, use this command if you're only executing the API test, and this one if you're only executing the UI test. And this is how you generate the Allure report. So we have another POM file here, configuration. This is the environment file. And now you get into the actual code for the actual automated framework. So you have a balance tracker file, spin models, in the API test, you have another POM file. And this also kind of differentiates the POM file used for the UI test versus the API test. And then here you have the base API test, the spin contract, and now you kind of actually have the actual test. So you have the balance rules test, um, and here is just using test ng to kind of define the different tests and how to execute it. It's actually leveraging those baseline tests, so it gives you a simple framework. You can also make this more complicated, but if depending on your level of expertise, this may be a good start for you. Whereas if you want a more advanced solution, you can challenge Magdi AI to say, hey, use this design pattern to structure the code for me. Here you have the UI test module, so you have another POM file, and then you have the base UI test. You have a page object model. So what it does is it defines all of your selectors in one Java file. So you get a starter for that. And then you have another test called the balance UI test, the spin UI test. And then here is the TestNG suite that you will use. It tells you here it's Windows friendly. It's using a Maven wrapper. And to top it all off, it's even telling you, okay, this is how you run the test. Here are your instructions. And here are the environment variables that you can optionally set if you ever want to override anything. And it's giving you some additional notes. Hey, these are some assumptions that I made. And then it's finally telling you, hey, is there anything you would like to change? Do you want to switch to TestNG to JUnit 5? Do you want GitHub Actions workflow? So these are also things that you can update the framework with. If you're satisfied, then you can just simply, if you scroll up here, you can kind of actually use the copy button and copy all of the contents here. But what I would advise you to do is, yeah, here you have the copy button. In the code block window, you can just simply copy this out once you create the file in your project, paste the contents, and then go from there. One of the features that we're looking to add to our test generator is to give you a new updated chat view window where we would make the selection process for generating the project a lot easier. So instead of interacting with it on a chat window, we want to give you an input window where you can kind of select your criteria for creating and or updating a project, and that would help you with making it easier, consuming less tokens, but make the selection process a lot easier and a little more intuitive. So, another thing that I can advise you to do is go ahead and copy this, and you can kind of paste it into whatever editor you want to use, and then you can save it. um, and the reason why you would want to do that is because if you want to test later on how we can update this, then you would have the code as it was originally generated. So until next time, we can click the back button. And until next time, see you in the next video.